just to be clear, a system is centred around the people it's serving. So you might call that service users. I'm from a care background, some say it's a child-centred practice. Obviously we know there are adults at the centre as well. Every penny, every job is centred towards making the service as adequate as possible for the people using it. If the people using it say that it's fractured, it's fractured. That is not a debate. There is no sort of... There's no discussion to have about that. With the greatest respect to everybody on the panel, we do disagree with what Steph said. We definitely do think that the system is fractured. That is something that we've all put across. We also really think it's important what Peter said, that while something can be fractured, it does not mean that it's useless. It does not mean that we've given up on it. This is the difference between having an argument with a partner or somebody that you love and walking out on them. If we didn't think that the system could be salvaged, we wouldn't be here. It's as simple as that. We also think that a lot of good can be done, and a lot of what Simon said seemed to be coming from different organisations liaising with each other and being a sense of communication. The work that I've done, working on the care system and youth work in general, has been about promoting good practice, and it's not complicated stuff. A lot of it comes to communication and having your empathy and your ethics in the right place. We have Jojo wants to sort of field some of the things that were said, and she's going to also speak for some of the other opinions we have here, and then we're going to have Sophia say a couple of things too.
I think we've all obviously got something in common, and we're all talking about whether systems are fractured or not. I think something that we can do from today is, it's hard to measure how fractured a system is because the elements that are really, really working in the system, we're using a language that young people can't understand. So we're all talking about children and young people and how important they are, and we all agree with that, but I think the problem sometimes happens is the language that we talk, the language that we use to talk to these young people. Every service has got a completely different language. So all these adults who are trying to help them are using all these different initials and all these different words and all these really long words, that they can't understand. So it's that thing that you can't measure how much a system's working if the person that you're there to help can't understand the help that you're trying to give them, and therefore they don't understand that when you do turn up to their house, you're there to help them, or when you give them all these forms, they have no idea that if they fill out the forms, or do you know what, let's scrap the forms all together and have a conversation, but we can't measure how fractured a system is if we keep using a language that young people don't understand, because then we're having conversations about them. They don't understand the conversations that are having about them. I mean, I've only got so far because at the end of every contract, I go and ask my dad what it means, because I don't know what it means. What does this word mean? What do I have to do with this? It's a language that you have to be in the system for a couple of years to understand, and I think we expect 13-year-olds, 14-year-olds, sometimes younger, sometimes older, to understand the language that we've developed that we don't need to use, when actually it's what help do you need, and go here to get it, or I'll do that for you. And I think we can simplify it, and then we can actually measure whether the system's fractured or not. That's what I think.
Did you want to say something now, or do you want to come in a little bit later if I just get you?
So I was just picking up on, I'm Sophia, children's rights, care experience, children's rights apprentice from Surrey. So I was just picking up from all of your comments, thank you very much. The one thing I sort of heard the most is how many professionals we've got. So in a young person's life, we've got doctors, psychiatrists, police, social workers, and yet a young person still feels so alone, even though you've got all these people around you. And I just feel that is because you're not really focusing on that young person as, I'm Sophia, I'm just a young person in care to many of these professionals that they have to visit daily. And that happens with Jojo by the sounds of your friends that you worked with. Sadly, he passed, and by the sounds of what you said, no one really knew him for him apart from you. And I think that's where we're really struggling with the most. And another thing that I feel that there needs to be so much more supported is 18 plus. As soon as you leave care, you are forgotten about. You're there to be sort of kind of supported, but you haven't got the support you need. And that is where you really, really need it. You've had this difficult life, you've managed to change everything around, and then all of a sudden, everyone in your life has just left you. And it's like, whoa, I'm totally on my own now. And I felt alone before, but now I'm totally on my own. And there needs to be a lot more support with that. Yeah, so that's really what I picked up on.
Thank you. I'm listening to what you said. I'm just juggle the order a little bit. We've got a question from Independent Supervisor Philip Sully next. It's question 3, but we're going to do it second because, well, we've covered some of it already, but you'll see Philip. And then other people can make comments a little bit later. But
what are the biggest challenges and obstacles to improving services in the current social and political landscape with its ever-increasing demands?
Peter, kick off with that? Go on. We'll build up a case and then we'll go to government right at the end. Thank Justine really couldn't be here today.
But the biggest challenges, I think, are getting this debate into everybody's head. We've got children and young people who are saying, if we say it's fractured, it's fractured. I think there's so much truth in that it really matters, and we mustn't lose sight of that. And the cries that we're getting from the left side here are very simple. Speak to us in language that we understand. Don't overcomplicate it. If you have to deal with 40 professionals as a child or a young person who are supposed to be safeguarding you, I can't get my head around looking after my family. 40 people is just impossible to manage, and it's absurd. So that sort of thinking needs to be inculcated in the way we approach this. It must be truly and only child-focused all the way through. And relationships that child wants and needs are the ones which we foster. The rest of us, let them get on with it. The bean counting that has to happen to be appropriate and adult about the management of this happens out of sight. That's the stuff which introduces all the management lingo which doesn't make any sense to other people. So changing the way we do it, having this debate as a wide debate, not just here in a room full of professional and interested parties, the whole public needs to be engaged in this discussion.
Going random now, Rex.
I agree with most of what's been said. I also think we tend to, and the one word I pick up from what I'm hearing on the left, so I don't think that sounds wrong, is a sense of belonging. The children in the system want to belong, they want to be possessed, they want to be loved. And that is the message I hear at court as well. And I think that is a message that needs to be got out there. How much money do you invest in order now to stop spending £100,000 on a prison budget and further down the line? I don't know the answer to the question, but I think it's pretty obvious that if you put money at the lower end of the scale, i.e. preventative work, and rather than be reactive, you're proactive, you've got to have a system that must be better, because you're building the foundation up, not the top down. And I think that's the point that needs to be understood by people. And I think another point that really concerns me is we spend too much time bothering about stuff like this, rather than actually getting a cup of tea out, sitting down and having a chat. And we're back at the same point, it's communication. The points that's been made by Jojo, break it down into language that, to use the ghastly expression, service users understand. But it's all about getting messages across in a way that people do understand. We've got tied up in too much red tape, too much protectionism in the sense of what happens within either social service or doctors' practice, because they're worried about things going wrong, therefore you've got to have an audit trail. If you get out there and get on with things, people don't complain because they appreciate the fact that you're doing a good job. And I think that is the essence. So let's get back to doing what we do best, which is the job rather than the paperwork.
Michelle, biggest challenges or obstacles?
Yeah.
I think the biggest challenges at the moment is around the finance and the thinking about and worrying about budgets and how do we really go beyond that, start pooling budgets, not continuing to redo things. I think your point around having lots of people doing the same thing and being able, young people, having someone to help them find their way through that is really, really important, and not wasting money. And there were a really major report came out recently about commissioning and good commissioning. And within that, there were no evidence of where multi-agencies were working towards the same outcomes and pooling budgets to achieve those outcomes for and with young people. And can I just pick up on the point about care leavers? I think we have seen some improvements in terms of continued support for care leavers. But again, it's not enough. I'm thinking about what really happens in families now. Children come back home. They come back home at 18, they come back home at 20, they come back home at 27. Where do children who are being in care go back home to when, you know, life has its ups and downs, as it does? And what happens to those children who are also hidden in society and less easy to see? And care leavers, young people who are 18, who've been in the criminal justice system, who then don't have a right to that, or children who have been trafficked and who are missing.
Brilliant. Simon, austerity, or are you happy to go on record and say austerities are really a big nightmare for you, or are there other obstacles?
There are. Sorry, what does austerity mean?
Sense of cuts, financial, dire straits, difficult positions, budgets, money in the system.
Two key things for me. The environment that we are now all having to work in, and the complexity of it, and the sheer volume of vulnerability. And that's for children, adults and old people. It is on a scale that I don't think anybody could have predicted 10 years ago, and we are only now, I think, truly coming to terms with the totality of the scale and the way that technology is being used and how that's creating its own vulnerability. And unfortunately, in my opinion, there isn't a golden thread that runs through all professionals who come into contact with vulnerable people, whereby, I simply use this analogy, where the hair on the back of the neck stands up and they just look and think, this person is vulnerable, and they then take it on board and they have a responsibility to do something about it. And I'm just not sure that we are in that position yet, and there are too many competing factors which are taking us away from that focus, where when somebody says something is wrong here, they recognise that there is a vulnerability. They might not actually know exactly what it is, but they recognise there's a vulnerability and don't feel able and confident enough to flag it up and report it, whereby something can then be done about it.
Dave?
I was only going to say really that the system's too driven by firefighting all the time, so we end up spending fortunes on doing things to young people at the point when everything's gone wrong. And we don't spend enough time trying to spot young people and give them and build on their strengths and their resilience earlier in the system, which is broadly a prevention point, right? But I can tell you that running through the thread of some of the questions is something about whether inspection, Ofsted or all that drives the system too much. I'll tell you what, in Finland, where they've got some of the best childcare services in the world, they've got no inspection. None. Don't have an Ofsted in Finland. So what the hell's going on there? I'll tell you what's going on there, because I asked them when I was in the Netherlands. So I'll tell you the answer as well, right? Which is that they let the people working in the system with children just get on and work with young people at the speed at which the young people need to go. And they try and do things early in the system. They don't wait until everything's gone wrong. And there is pretty overwhelming evidence emerging in the areas of the country where things are going well, the resources are being used in the right balance. So there's more prevention and less firefighting. And unless we acknowledge that, we are going to continue to struggle with the system.
So I would agree with most of the things that are, well, probably all of the things that have been said. I wouldn't underestimate the challenge that services are facing because of reduced budgets. But as Dave said, what we sometimes see though is some of the best practice that you see and the best performance actually they're not spending the most money. So actually it's about how you configure your services and how you engage the wider community in deciding what those services are actually that will make the difference. So money, yes, I'm not saying that is not important, or resources. Actually having access to great services is, but actually how you configure that is quite important. I was also thinking that, and as Dave sort of mentioned about, and other people have said about, whether we want to do things in a way that we think is the right way. And again, I've been working on this area for quite some time. I remember talking to young people a number of years ago where we were talking about the fact that actually the system needs to flex. So people need to have the flexibility to do things that respond to a child as a unique individual. So it would not be about, actually, I've got a set of guidance here and I've got to do it this way. Actually, they need to be able to respond. And you know, there was a view, and maybe governments previously have responded to, well, actually this has gone wrong, so actually we're going to issue more sets of guidance because that will make it better. And actually child protection work is unpredictable. Of course it is, because we're dealing with very difficult and challenging issues, and therefore I think actually we need to be able to allow that, of those individuals who are working with children and families, to be able to flex their response according to the needs of the young people before them.